Just a reminder, on our YouTube and anywhere you listen to podcasts, we have interviews talking to the amazing creatives who help make film you love a reality. For example, makeup artist and director Todd Tucker. Todd moved to Los Angeles, California in 1990 and became highly respected amongst top special effects makeup and creature creators in the industry. While shaping his path, he surpassed working over 100 feature films and TV shows. In addition, he created and acted many of the creature characters for the supernatural TV series Charmed. Part of the creative team for movies such as Mrs. Doubtfire, Pirates of the Caribbean, Van Helsing, Hook, and many others, Tucker is now president of Illusion Industries, Inc., a special effects makeup studio. He has directed 2 feature films, Monster Mutt and Terrors of Hallows Eve, and is currently working on a 3rd. So we're going to talk about his filmography and highlight some of the films he's worked on, starting with Star Trek VI, The Undiscovered Country.
I was lucky that thing had knees.
That was not his knee. Not everybody keeps their genitals in the same place, Captain.
I know you think I'm going to start with some Captain Kirk facts, but actually, we're going to talk about William Shakespeare. Are you ready? To be or not to be? That is the question. Whether 'tis nobler in the mind to suffer the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune, or to take arms against a sea of troubles and by opposing end them. To die, to sleep, no more, and by sleep to say we end. Sound familiar? It goes on and then concludes with, but that the dread of something after death, the undiscovered country from whose bourne no traveler returns, puzzles the will and makes us rather bear those ills we have than fly to others that we know not of. Thus conscience doth make cowards of us all, and thus the native hue of resolution is sickled over with pale cast of thought. And enterprises of great pith and moment, with this regard their currents turn awry and lose the name of action. So, what is the undiscovered country? Hamlet is thinking about death. He's pretty depressed, finding everything in his life vile. The aforementioned, but that the dread of something after death, the undiscovered country from whose bourne no traveler returns. The Undiscovered Country was directed by Nicholas Meyer, who also helmed the acclaimed Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan. Meyer originally wanted the title Star Trek II, The Undiscovered Country. However, Paramount Pictures changed the film's title against Meyer's wishes to Wrath of Khan to help hide Spock's demise towards the end of the film. It's not unusual for Trek to look to Shakespeare. The original television series had several episode titles influenced by his work. Daggers of the Mind, The Conscience of the King, All Our Yesterdays, By Any Other Name, the list continues. Authors Nick Nicholas and Andrew Strader of the Klingon Shakespeare Restoration Project translated Hamlet into Klingon, inspired by the line in Star Trek Undiscovered Country, "You have not experienced Shakespeare until you have read him in the original Klingon." Both William Shatner, who played Captain Kirk, and Patrick Stewart, who portrayed Captain Picard, were trained as Shakespearean actors. Patrick Stewart worked with Royal Shakespeare Company for several years. Where were we? Star Trek Undiscovered Country was the last film in the franchise with the original Star Trek cast. Kirk's final mission with the Enterprise forged an unprecedented galactic peace between the United Federation of Planets and their enemies, the Klingons. Even the film's tagline, "Between War and Peace there exists the undiscovered country, the final mission," stated rather plainly that this was the end, an unknown future, as the stage was set for the Star Trek Next Generation cast to take up the mantle of the feature film franchise. Let's take a look at the classic family film Hook.
So happens, I am a lawyer. Kill the lawyer! Kill the lawyer! I'm not that kind of lawyer.
Directed by Steven Spielberg and released in 1991. The story follows Peter Banning, played by Robin Williams, a successful lawyer who has lost sight of what life is really about. And after being contacted by a mysterious figure to visit Neverland, he then must recapture his youthful spirit and imagination in order to save his children from the villainous Captain Hook, played by Dustin Hoffman. Screenwriter Jim B. Hart had been trying to find a new angle to the Peter Pan story for years, when his son brought up the subject of Peter Pan, asking whether he'd ever grown up. And then he realized that Peter did grow up, just like all baby boomers do. So he patterned Peter after several of his friends on Wall Street, where the pirates wear three-piece suits and ride in limos. It's honestly a really fun film that if you haven't seen, you should check out. And this leads us to Peter Pan, who originally debuted in The Little White Bird as an infant. The Little White Bird was a novel written by J.M. Barrie for adults in 1902. And though Peter's only prominent in a few chapters, the book's popularity, partially due to the reader's attachment to Pan, led Barrie to write the 1904 play Peter Pan, or The Boy Who Wouldn't Grow Up. And then in 1911, Barrie's novel titled Peter and Wendy was published, telling the story of Peter Pan, a mischievous little boy
Peter Pan?
who can fly and has adventures on the island of Neverland. The island is populated with mermaids, fairies, American Indians, and pirates. And the Peter Pan stories also involve the characters Wendy Darling and her two brothers John and Michael, Peter's fairy Tinkerbell, the Lost Boys, and the pirate Captain Hook. According to the all-knowing internet, there has been 10 live-action film adaptations of Peter Pan. He's featured in 12 television shows and 3 animated feature films. And Tinkerbell has a few of her own films as well. And so now, naturally, we need to talk about Tinkerbell.
Come here. You're charged with high treason, Tink. Are you guilty or not guilty? Guilty.
Tinkerbell is a fictional character from J.M. Barrie's 1904 play Peter Pan and its 1911 novelization Peter and Wendy. She has appeared in a variety of film and television adaptations of the Peter Pan stories, in particular the 1953 animated Walt Disney picture Peter Pan. That led to her own series of animated movies, Tinkerbell, Tinkerbell and the Lost Treasure, Tinkerbell and the Great Fairy Rescue, Tinkerbell and the Secret of the Wings, Tinkerbell and the Pirate Fairy, and Tinkerbell and the Legend of the Neverbeast. So much Tink. But honestly, we want to take a turn from the cinematic world to the real world for a moment. In the summer of 1961, Tinkerbell flew over Sleeping Beauty's castle during the fireworks. Lifelong circus performer Tiny Klein, at age 70, became the first Tinkerbell at Disneyland. Suspended 146 feet up in the air, she glided down a long 784-foot-long cable from the Matterhorn to Sleeping Beauty's castle at roughly 30 miles per hour to signal the beginning of the fireworks. The entire trip took approximately 30 seconds. She was barely 4 feet 10 inches tall and weighed 98 pounds. And at the other end of the cable were 2 big guys with mattresses, and she would slam into the mattresses, and even though she was a tiny person, she built up so much momentum that she would knock the guys over. Klein performed for 3 summers despite battling stomach cancer. She died on July 5th, 1964, and at age 73, and is buried in Englewood Park Cemetery in Los Angeles, California. Her simple gravestone says, Tiny Helen Klein, or Tinkerbell. So, there you have it. Tinkerbell was a badass 70-year-old lady and a really amazing part of history. In 1976, Anne Rice's debut novel, Interview with the Vampire, revitalized the interest in vampires, and that was true for screenwriter James V. Hart. So he picked up Bram Stoker's novel Dracula, and he began imagining his own version of a Dracula screenplay. More than a decade later, after spending most of the 1980s working on the script in all of his spare time, Hart began looking for production companies who might produce his new vision of the vampire, but none of the major studios were interested. By 1990, he'd managed to find one production company, but only as a made-for-TV cable production. The script was rescued from the basic cable by Winona Ryder, who was in search for more mature roles. With Winona Ryder attached to Dracula, the production began its search for a director in 1991 and found legendary Oscar winner Francis Ford Coppola because he had previously cast Winona in The Godfather Part 3 as Mary Corleone, daughter of Michael Corleone. But she had to back out for health issues. She met with him, and by the end of the meeting, he had a script in hand, and the rest is cinematic history.
I condemn you to living death, to eternal hunger for living blood.
Todd Tucker was part of the makeup team on the classic Robin Williams film Mrs. Doubtfire.
God, it's hot in here.
Some movies are well-known adaptations of novels. So did you know Mrs. Doubtfire is actually an adaptation of Anne Fine's 1987 novel for young adults, Elias Madame Doubtfire? Anne has written over 60 books for children and young people. Winner of numerous awards, she is twice the winner of both the Carnegie Medal,
Britain's most prestigious children's book award, and the Whitbread Award. Twice chosen as Children's Author of the Year in the British Book Awards, Anne Fine was also the first novelist to be honored as a Children's Laureate in the United Kingdom. In 2003, Anne became a Fellow of the Royal Society of Literature, and she was awarded an OBE. Her work has been translated into 45 languages. Anne Fine had her first choice to play Daniel Hillard, who pretended to be Mrs. Doubtfire,
And that was Warren Beatty.
By the 1990s, he was working on his own projects, having established himself as a successful director. But before the legend Robin Williams got the part, it was also offered to comedian and Home Improvement star Tim Allen, who declined the role. In fact, he also declined the role of Stu, rival to Mrs. Doubtfire. But we all know Robin took the role of Doubtfire and future James Bond Pierce Brosnan as Stu.
Isn't it gorgeous?
Is it real?
It is very real, Mrs.
Oh,
Doubtfire,
then you
very
can
real.
either wear that or feed a small country. That's so nice.
Williams would do a lot of improvising, of course, and apparently wanted to do a scene as many as 20 times to get them out of his system. This added some time to the movie, which had to be pared down in editing. Over 30 minutes of the movie hit the cutting room floor between the initial cut and the final cut. And many of the deleted scenes have been included in DVD releases, much of which involved Gloria, the nosy neighbor, battling Daniel. We can't forget to talk about the film's director, Chris Columbus, who made his name by writing Gremlins. Before helming Mrs. Doubtfire, he directed Home Alone and its New York set sequel, but he has a strong list of films he's directed, including Adventures in Babysitting, Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone, Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets, Rent, Percy Jackson and the Olympians, Pixels, and The Christmas Chronicles Part 2. Off-topic fact about Gremlins. Did you know that it was PG rated and parents complained it was too violent for their children? Along with a couple other movies that were released that year. So the powers that be created the PG-13 rating. More than PG, but not quite R. There were attempts for a sequel in 2001, even though there was no follow-up novel to adapt. Reportedly, Daniel, aka Mrs. Doubtfire, moves close to his daughter Lydia's college so that he can keep an eye on her. However, there were some problems with this script, and those problems scrapped plans to begin filming in 2007. A sequel was announced again in 2014, this time with a different writer. But unfortunately, Robin Williams passed away soon after that, and all plans for a sequel were canceled. There was, however, a musical version in 2018.
You could turn me into your greatest creation. I'm desperate. I'm in your hands. So take this man and make me a woman.
It premiered in Seattle in 2019 before moving to Broadway. Not long after the previews began, the COVID-19 pandemic hit. Previews would start up again in October of 2021 and officially open in December of 2021. It finally closed in May 2022. Rob McClure earned a Tony nomination for his work in the role of Daniel Hillard. There you go. Everything I can think to share about Mrs. Doubtfire. Who knows what evil lurks in the hearts of men? The Shadow knows. Have you seen the 1994 film The Shadow? It's a superhero film from Universal Pictures starring Alec Baldwin with Penelope Ann Miller, Peter Boyle, Ian McKellen, and Tim Curry. The Shadow first appeared in the 1930s as the mysterious narrator of the radio show Detective Story Hour, which was developed to boost sales of Detective Story magazine. In 1937, The Shadow, a new radio drama, premiered based on the character created by Walter B. Gibson. At the end of each episode, The Shadow reminded listeners, the weed of crime bears bitter fruit. Crime does not pay. The Shadow knows. Recognizing the demand, Walter B. Gibson was commissioned to write stories about The Shadow, using the pen name of Maxwell Grant. Gibson wrote 282 out of 325 tales over the next 20 years, a novel-length story twice a month. The first story produced was The Living Shadow, published on April 1st, 1931. Gibson's characterization of the Shadow laid the foundations for the archetype of the superhero, including stylized imagery and titles, sidekicks, supervillains, and a secret identity. Clad in black, the Shadow operated mainly after dark as a vigilante in the name of justice, terrifying criminals into vulnerability.
I'm onto your plan, Khan. You still don't have the beryllium sphere, and without it, you can't complete the bomb. Besides, you know I'm gonna stop you.
Are we really about to talk about the Smurfs? Yes. Right now? Yes, we are. Yes, we are, because it's part of Todd Tucker's filmography. The Smurf, you say? Todd worked on the villain of the film, Gargamel, played by Hank Azaria. And he Smurfing killed it. Azaria completely embodies the character.
Gargamel.
Ah, Smurfing.
But let's talk about some Smurfing Smurfbacks. Why the Smurf not? Did you know that Smurfs have appeared in comic books for over 60 years? They were created in 1958 by Belgian cartoonist Pierre Colliford, who went by his pen name Peo. The original Smurf comics were published in French and later translated into Dutch, English, German, and Spanish. In 1987, the comic was adapted into a cartoon and produced by Hanna-Barbera. You might know them from their other notable characters, including Yogi Bear, Huckleberry Hound, the Flintstones, the Jetsons, the Scooby Gang, Blue Falcon, Space Ghost, and many others. So they were in Smurf in good company. A mix of computer animation and live action, The Smurfs was released by Columbia Pictures on July 29, 2011. Despite negative reviews, the film grossed $564 million worldwide against a $110 million budget, making it the 9th highest grossing film of 2011 and Sony Picture Animation's most commercially successful film to date. Followed up with a prequel in 2013, which Todd Tucker also worked on.
To see him in that outfit, he gets those teeth in. There we are.
The Smurf franchise rebooted with an all-animated movie Smurfs Lost Village with Demi Lovato as the voice of Smurfette. The most recent reboot is slated February 14th, 2025 release and has Rihanna in the Smurfette role. If you want to see Todd Tucker's full interview with Below the Line, click the Smurfing link in the bio. Click the Smurf out of it. Smurfing watch the interview. And Smurf you if you don't like it. And subscribe.